Okay. Hey, folks. My name is Lou Della Parra. I'm very excited to be here today. If you folks are following along with this meetup group, I actually started a lot of the technology that you're going to see today at this very meeting probably a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years at this point. And it's oh yeah, I will. It's really kind of cool to be able to show you folks again what this technology can do. So before I get into the presentation itself, I do have some good news and some bad news. Full disclaimer, the bad news is you're not going to get the full experience today. I'm going to save a lot of the content that I'm going to do for DevCon. I think the DevCon that we have coming up is going to be one of the best DevCons in a number of years. I have a lot of content related to IoT, machine learning that I'm going to save for that conference. So if you want to go further, you want to see more of what NodeRed can do after today, come to DevCon. My session's on Tuesday at, I believe, 4:15. I'd love to see you there. Cool. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen okay? Yeah. Awesome. Let me close this. Okay, so before I get into the slides, I do want to do a very quick demo just to kind of pique your interest. What you're seeing on screen here is a FileMaker file. It's very basic. It's got two fields in it. It's got a title and it's got a message with a giant button over in the top right corner. One of the things I love about FileMaker is how many different platforms you can use it on, right? You can use it on an iPhone with Go. You can use it on the web with WebDirect. You can host it with FileMaker Server. You can run it standalone with FileMaker Pro. One thing I've wanted to do for a really long time is to be able to send push notifications to different users in a file. So what I have here is a message and it says FileMaker is amazing. And I'm going to hit push notification here. And you'll see in the top right corner of my screen, I get a push notification. Now, unfortunately, you people playing along at home can't see this, but I also got that same push notification to my phone. The way I was able to do this is to actually use a script in FileMaker to call an API endpoint that talks to a push notification service. It's this script here. You can see the HTTP request coming down here. And I'll do that one more time because it is kind of fast. And I'll hit push notification. It shows up in the top right corner of my computer. At the same time, it shows up on my phone. And at the same time, it shows up on my watch. The brilliant part about that is FileMaker doesn't have to do a lot of that work. FileMaker can rely upon other systems to do that work. In this case, we're relying upon NodeRed, and we're relying upon pushover for the push notifications. Cool. So what exactly is NodeRed? Well, let's take a step back. As I said, about a year and a half ago, I started work on a client called FMS API Client. And that was a JavaScript client. That client was designed to interact with the FileMaker Data API. It's open source. It's available online. At the end of this presentation, you're going to get a link to it. All the examples that I show you today are fully documented online in both the NodeRed open source project and in this FMS API Client project. It extrapolates all of the V1 data API, which means it works on FileMaker Server 17 and FileMaker Server 18. It matches the data API V1 feature set. That means we can do things with metadata layouts from FileMaker 18. We can do things with the FileMaker 17 feature set, like create, get, edit, list, find. And then there are also additional utilities for working with data API responses. There are some things you'll notice as you start working with the data API that get kind of complex. Nope, this popped up. One of those things is dealing with container data, right? You might get a URL for an image in a data API response, but getting that container data back can be a little bit of a hassle. FMS API Client adds utilities to make that easy. Furthermore, when you receive responses back from the data API, you get it nested inside of field data, portal data, or data property. FMS API Client has utilities that allows you to extrapolate that data easily to serve it to another API. It's also a fully documented open source client. Every method in FMS API Client is documented. Every node or method in the NodeRed API is also documented. It's also 100% test coverage. There's 255 tests. I'm very proud. I wrote each and every one of them. That means that every line of code within the code base is tested to function appropriately. Go me. NodeRed. NodeRed is a very interesting product. It is one that's built upon Node.js. It's very, very cool. In fact, the data API is also built upon Node.js, so there's a lot of symmetry there. It takes advantage of the event-driven non-blocking model of Node.js, and what I mean by that is events can be asynchronous. You don't necessarily have to receive events in a certain order. It's ideal to run at the edge of a network or on low-cost hardware. That tends to be particularly important when you're dealing with IoT devices, right? You might have a Raspberry Pi, you might have a particle argon or boron that don't have a lot of power, and yet they're able to run NodeRed because there's a UI layer and there's a node layer, but there's not a lot on top. There's not a lot of overhead. It's also a browser-based deployment. And what that means is that you don't necessarily need special hardware to run it. You can run it directly in a browser, and the editor makes it really easy to write flows, to create different links of nodes that work together. And we're going to see what that looks like in a little bit. It can also be deployed to runtime in a single click. This is kind of a new idea. In previous days, if you were to write a FileMaker file, you'd write the file, maybe upload it to a server, give someone the URL, and then they'd be able to access it. With NodeRed, you write your flow, you click a button, and then instantaneously, that flow has been moved to production. It's instantly available. So it really lowers the barrier of entry when you're developing and working with APIs because you can rapidly change and deploy those changes very quickly to production. It also has something very interesting and very special that I really like, and that's a visual and flow programming techniques. Flows are created that align very closely to the mapping of our business processes, right? Package is delivered, that package is then opened, and then given to the correct person, right? Those are three separate events that occur linearly for an entire process. The way that we would describe that event of receiving a package is the same way we would program or code a NodeRed flow. So what does this really all mean? Well, if you were to try to use FMS API Client, you'd be looking at something like this, right? And if we break this apart for a second, you'd see that I have a function call, and the function call is called create many records, and it takes a client, and then it does something with promises and groups them all together, and we actually end up creating a hero that is Anakin Skywalker, a hero that is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and a hero that is Yoda. Like, that's cool, right? I mean, it looks kind of cool. It's formatted really nice on the screen, but not a lot of people know how to write that, right? When people really look at FMS API Client, they're like, hey, Lou, that's great, but now I need to know JavaScript. And that's actually a significant problem. Not a lot of people know JavaScript or even necessarily care to learn it. I will pause for a second and say I'm a big advocate of learning JavaScript, so I recommend everyone does so, but do it on your own pace. Yeah, slowly get into it. So that's what NodeRed allows you to do. It allows you to transfer something like this with a create that's nested with a paragraph of words into something that is visual like this. This is that same flow built in NodeRed. It's very different, right? We have start on one side, we have create Anakin Skywalker, we have create Obi-Wan, and we have create Yoda, and then finally a debug, right? We can literally look from left to right and know exactly what's happening within this flow. We can also visually see the different items, different pieces on the screen. So FMS API Client is built inside of another project that I wrote called NodeRed Contrib FileMaker. Very long title, and that very long title is a standard for NodeRed. When you go look for modules with NodeRed, they're all going to be prefaced, or most of the time they'll be prefaced with NodeRed Contrib. So I didn't pick that very long title, I just went with the standard. It abstracts the FileMaker Data API. It provides data API session management. This is particularly important when you start scaling up your API integrations. It also matches the V1 Data API functionality while also providing those same utilities as FMS API Client. Everything that you can do in FMS API Client that I called out earlier, you can do in NodeRed. So it's a one-for-one functionality set. Currently, there are these nodes, and I'm going to really quickly go through them. They match all the functionality of the V1 Data API. You have log in, log out, create record, edit record, delete record, upload file to a container, set a global, get field data, that's a utility, we'll talk about that in a little bit, get record IDs for a particular record set, transform the data, get containers, get a particular record, list records, find records, trigger a script, and finally upload.
You have to do the work of putting all this here?
Yes, and by somebody, me. I wrote all of these, yep. And I'm very, very, very happy to say, you folks are the first people to hear this, that as of yesterday, I released NodeRed Contrib 2.0, which adds all the functionality of FileMaker 18. So now we have get product info, get database scripts, get databases, get database layout, get layout info, and duplicate record. So we get all the metadata that you might want to have from a FileMaker file, and then we also have the ability to duplicate records. Cool. So let's talk about what NodeRed flow looks like, what the anatomy might be, before we jump in, so we kind of have a better understanding of what this might do. And for an example, I have a payload, right? I have some information that I received. This payload is Millennium Falcon, all lowercase. Okay, it's going to start off on the left-hand side of the screen, and it's going to flow through different nodes. The first of which might be a capitalization node, right? This node's job is going to be to capitalize anything that is given to it, and then export whatever it's capitalized. So in comes Millennium Falcon, it goes through the capitalization node, and it comes out Millennium Falcon all capitalized, also known as enhanced Millennium Falcon. And then finally, it'll move on to the next node. And this is the entirety of the NodeRed flow, right? We start off with a payload on one side, or a trigger on one side. We're going to pass through a whole bunch of different nodes that are going to modify our original content. And then finally, we'll exit to either another system, a web viewer, or maybe the debugger. For the majority of our presentation today, we're going to see things in the debugger because it's easy to visualize what the data looks like. Oh, okay. So save that in. And let's take a look at what NodeRed looks like. Okay, so this is NodeRed. This is part of that browser-based deployment that I mentioned earlier. On the left-hand side, I have what's called the palettes, right? This palette here, these nodes, are all the different modification pieces that I can add to a flow. In particular, the ones that we're interested in today are the ones given by NodeRed Contrib FileMaker. And those are here. You can see them all in what I like to call FileMaker teal. This may not be the right color. It's about as close as I was able to get. You'll notice here I have a whole bunch of different nodes. And then towards the middle of the screen here, I have what's called the workspace, right? And that's where we're going to construct our flow. So let's do that. Let's walk through together. Let's construct one flow. We're gonna duplicate this create flow and kind of work through how this is all put together. So I'm going to create a new flow. I'm going to do that by creating a new flow up in the top right corner, hitting the addition symbol. And I'm going to grab first my create node. All right, I hover over it, and you'll notice that there is a really quick and dirty explanation on what this node does, right? Just by hovering over it, I can see that this node creates a record in FileMaker. The defaults are message.payload.layout for layout context and message.payload.data for setting field or portal data. So before we move forward, let's take a quick second and explain what message.payload.layout and message.payload.data means. Those are both JSON paths, right? Message.payload.layout means that there's going to be a message object, right? That message object is going to have a payload property. That payload property is also going to be a JSON object, and it's going to have a property of layout, which is most likely going to be a string, and that string is going to be the name of our layout. And if my words aren't doing it for you, we're going to actually visually see that in a second or two. Message.payload.data is very much the same thing, right? Only in this case, rather than being a string, it's going to be some data. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to drag it onto my workspace here, and now I have a create record node. Right now I have almost a flow, not 100% there yet, but I'm close. But you'll notice that when I added that node to the workspace, I get a little red triangle in the top right corner and a little blue circle in the top right corner. That red triangle means that something is not configured. And that's a very important piece of information to know because this isn't all we need to do in order to create a flow. We also need to tell NodeRed Contrib FileMaker what client it's going to use. So I'm going to click on the create record, and in order to find out more about it, I'm going to look on the right-hand side. This is our info pane. This info pane expands the documentation that we saw earlier, right? So in the palette, when I hovered over it, I got a short snippet of what that node could do. On the right-hand side, when I click on it, inside my info pane, I get a much more fleshed out part of the documentation. I can see a lot more of what this node can do. In fact, the person that wrote this library took the painstaking effort to document every property possible for the create record node and link to the base documentation. I know that guy, he's awesome. So if I look at the help and I say, okay, create record, well, I need a layout context, right? That is maybe part of the configuration I need to do. Well, if I need to know more about that, I can look inside the info pane on the right-hand side, and it says the input is layout, and it's the layout to use when creating a record. Cool, okay, I can work with this. And then we see, well, data, right? I also mentioned message.payload.data. Well, moving it one line down, you see it says the field or portal data to set when creating a record. Okay, that makes sense, but I'm not necessarily sure what that means, right? What does field or portal data really mean? Well, if you see, there's a link to more info, and if I click on that link, it's going to go back to the FMS API Client documentation and tell us exactly what the data syntax means. So when I say we need message.payload.data, I'm expecting that message.payload.data is going to look like this, data, and the name is going to be Yoda, and his vehicle is the Force, because if Yoda's driving around in anything, he's driving around in the Force. Cool. So I now know how to configure this client, but I'm not done yet. I haven't yet created my first flow. I need to add a few things. I need to add an initiating event, and I need to add an ending event. I need something to connect this create record together. So I'm going to go on up, and I'm going to grab the inject node. That is a default node that comes with NodeRed. It's very, very useful when dealing with first developing a node because it allows you to trigger your flow without having to go in and wire it up to an API or set a timer. You can just click the button and it's going to run the flow. So I've added the inject node, and I want to connect these two things together. I'm going to click on the left-hand side dot. I'm going to drag it to the right-hand side dot. And in doing so, I've created a flow. I'm going to do that one more time, only this time I'm going to do it with the debug node. I'm going to drag the debug node over here, make this a little bit smaller. And I'm going to do the same thing that we did with the inject node. I'm going to grab the left-hand side dot, drag to the right-hand side dot, and now I've connected these three things together in a flow. Right? Cool. We've moved forward with our flow here. But notice I said in the very beginning that the little red triangle means that it's not necessarily configured. That's still there, right? So I'm not necessarily finished yet. We're going through this very slow, bear with me. I'm going to double click on the create node, and I get my configuration, right? This is what we were talking about when we saw the info pane in the very beginning, right? I see here that I can name my node. I can select a client. We're going to see that in a minute. I have to select a layout. And in this case, like we saw with the defaults, it's message.payload.layout. And then there's some data, and we see that it's message.payload.data, right? Let's go in and let's create a client. So we actually create a record. Sorry, I thought that was a question. I'm going to click my example client just to save the time of actually inputting some data, but I do want to show you what this looks like because it's got a really important function. So I clicked edit here, and that brought up my client pane. Every NodeRed FileMaker node requires a configured client, right? You can use the same client for a few different nodes. You can use multiple clients for different nodes. If you want to talk to 2 or 3 or 4 different FileMaker files, or 2 or 3 or 4 different FileMaker servers, you can do so just by configuring different clients. The client takes a server, a database, and a username, account, and password, right? And that's the same credentials that you'd have with the Data API. I skipped over concurrency, and I did that on purpose because I really want to dive into this a little bit. What I found when working with NodeRed is that it is massively scalable. I can add, I've seen up to 150 devices communicating to one FileMaker server at a time. And that's really cool, right? That's really powerful to be able to collect that much data from a whole bunch of different devices. But the reality is, when you get to that level, it becomes increasingly important to manage what devices are talking when and how many connections you have at any given time. We don't want 100 devices all of a sudden talking to our FileMaker server in the middle of the day when we have 10 or 15 other users trying to use the system. So I built in this concurrency model. And what this concurrency model is it's a limitation on how many sessions I will open for you at any given time with this client. So if I configure this client with a concurrency of 1, I'm only ever going to open 1 session for you. And you might be thinking, well, okay, you open up 1 session, I can just send as many responses as I want within that 1 session. And that's true. You can do that, right? You can just open up 1 session and then send as many requests as you want concurrently within that session. But there is a possibility, because it is all one FileMaker user session, that you could have a collision. And we want to prevent that, particularly when we're in a very scalable environment. So what we do here is, if you have a node that is trying to communicate with your FileMaker server, it will wait for any other communication to be finished. We're effectively queuing up your request to the data API to the limit of your concurrency. So if you have 100 or 150 devices, you might set this concurrency up to 15, right? And what that means is, if your devices need it, this client will automatically open up to 15 user sessions for the NodeRed client, right? It won't do it automatically, right? If you make it 15, it's not going to automatically do it 15. It's only going to do it when it needs it, based on how many requests you have in. That is new as of NodeRed Contrib 2.0. So new as of day ago, I wanted to share that with you. Okay, so we've configured our client. I'm going to do something a little bit more sane than 15. I'm going to do 1. I'll hit update there. I'm going to leave it message.payload.layout and message.payload.data. I'm going to leave those as it is. I'm going to click done here. And when I do that, you'll notice that the red triangle that was inside my create node has gone away, right? Awesome. I've successfully configured this client, right? But I'm still not done. There's a little bit more I have to do here. I have to tell FileMaker what layout context I want. And I do that in a few different ways. But the easiest way is to come into my inject node and give it a JSON payload. I mentioned earlier that we needed message.payload.data and message.payload.layout. So I'm going to make those. I'm going to make layout. And my layout's going to be people. And I'm going to make data. And my data is going to have a name. And it's going to be Anakin Skywalker. Awesome. So now I've configured the inject node. I'm going to inject this JSON payload into my create record node. Okay, I'll click deploy in the top right corner. And now my flow is in production, right? If I wanted to trigger this, and I want you to keep your eye on the debugger here, I'll click on inject, and you see I got a payload, right? I got the layout, the data, and even cooler, I got a record ID and a mod ID. I've officially created a FileMaker record. Now you might be like, well, hey, that could be demo magic, Lou. Let me show you.
What?
Demo magic, could be demo magic. Oh, not that, that's later. Okay, here's, oh, I've been making a lot of records today. I've got 3,603. I'll hit my inject node. Come back into FileMaker, 3,605. So I've just created a record. There's also a timer going on, which is why it's doing more. Cool. So that is what it takes to create one flow. We went through that kind of slow. You don't necessarily take this much time to go through each individual flow, but I wanted to walk through each individual area so you're kind of comfortable. Go ahead.
Why are we doing this?
Why are we doing making a flow?
Yeah. What is this going to be for?
You'll see. You'll see. We'll get there. Yeah, this is really simple, right? We just created a record, hasn't necessarily done anything too fabulous yet, but it will, right? The power is there. Okay, so let's make it a little more advanced. Instead of creating a record, let's find a bunch of records. Let's do a find. So I'll come on over here and I will find my find node. Drag it on the display, and I'm going to link this together. We're going to do 2 at once. Do that. Delete my create record. Same thing. I have to configure it. I'm going to tell it I'm going to use my example client. I'll click done. Now I've configured this. Now by hovering over the find, I see that this takes message.payload.layout. Awesome. Nothing I have to really change there. And it also takes message.payload.query. Right? Okay, well, that's easy. I'll just change this around a little bit. Come on over to my payload. And instead of data, I'm going to give it a query. And instead of name, maybe we'll do name. We'll do star. Everybody likes name star, right? And much faster than the last time, I'll confirm this. Bring up my debugger. Clear out what's there. Inject this, and now I did a FileMaker find. I have my layout, my query. New in 18, I have data info, which is information about my request, and then I have all the records, right? Each particular piece of the data, right? I have field data, portal data, record ID, and mod ID. So then we've just scaled up a little bit. We've done a find. But again, right, this is not all that cool, right? I've just kind of created a flow. You could do this in many other different ways. So let's make this even better. Let's change this perform find into an API request, right? We want to actually have an API supported by FileMaker. So I'm going to come to my NodeRed area, and I'm going to grab my HTTP response node, and I'm going to grab my HTTP request node. I'm going to replace my inject node, and I'm going to replace my debug node with the response node. And I'm going to say that this is going to be my, we'll call this names, because I'm not very clever at the moment. I'll deploy that. And now in this case, rather than using the inject node, I can visit the website and get my FileMaker data. Let's do that. And I'll go to red.mutesymphony.com, because that's my NodeRed server. Names. And think about it for a second, because there's a lot of data. Yeah, somebody might need to mute. Oh. This may take a second. I might want to put a limit on this. Let me limit this to 10. Oh, and actually, I need to add a query. So it'll be name star. Okay, let's try that one more time. Nope. Let's see if there's an error. There is an error. Okay. It's telling me the layout is missing. It's awesome because I did message.payload.layout. I never specified what it is. So let's do that again. Let's do people. Done. Deploy. There we go. And now I have my FileMaker data. But that's not all that cool, right? I mean, that's just a whole bunch of text in a web viewer. Let's make this even cooler. So rather than do a get and a perform find in HTTP, I want to support a website. So I'm going to make this a little bit better. I'm going to expand my flow a little bit, add a few more nodes, and we get something like this, right? Let me zoom out a little bit. This is two different web pages, right? This is a list page and a detail page. Before we dive in to what this is, let me show it to you. Okay, I'm going to go here. Instead of names, I'm going to do Jedi. And I get a list view, right? Really like to note that all that 3,000 records that you saw, they're all in this list here. In this case, because it's a standard find, you're only getting the 100, but you could do more if you wanted. If I click on one of the rows, I go to the second page, and that is a detail page. And that detail page brings up the name, the biography of the record, and then the image. So we're getting field data and portal data all within the page. And all of that functionality is supported by these two flows. Let's walk through what those are. So I have my list page HTTP response endpoint that is just like the HTTP response endpoint we saw earlier, right? It's just saying like, hey, go get me this information. I'm then mapping the request with a map node, basically telling it, hey, when you get a request, go to the layout of people and then list a whole bunch of Jedi. But it turns out, if we look at the debugger one more time, that as I mentioned earlier, FileMaker data is not always necessarily in the right format. And in fact, it's a big issue with when you deal with APIs to get the data in the correct format, right? Our FileMaker data in this case is nested within field data and portal data. And we don't necessarily want that for our website. So we have a transform node. And what that transform node does is extracts out the field data and portal data into just a data object. We're basically unnesting the field data and the portal data so we can view it on the site. We're going to see what that looks like in a second. And then we create a template. And this template is really just standard HTML, right? This is an HTML page, much like we've seen before, with the caveat of that it's HTML and mustache templating. And I'm using what's mustache templating in order to build my rows of FileMaker data. So I have some standard CSS, I have a head, and then inside the body, I have payload.jedi, and then a row. And inside of payload.jedi, I have name, and that's how I'm actually going through and doing each name. On top of that, I have an href, right, a link of the ID. So I'm using, from my FileMaker payload, I'm using the name and the ID in order to build our list. Moving down a little further, I have the data endpoint. That data endpoint does something very similar, except rather than list records, it actually performs a find, right? Because we don't necessarily want a whole bunch of different Jedis. We only want the one that we're looking for. In our case here, we only want Luke, right? He's really the only one that really matters in the whole saga. Maybe Leia matters too. I shouldn't say that. So we're going from a get for a detail page. We're mapping the request in the very same way, right? We're doing message.layout is equal to people. In this case, because it's a find, like we saw in the very beginning, we're doing message.query with an ID. And then we're performing the find. We're checking the data length to make sure that we're actually getting back a record. Because if we're not getting back a record, we don't want to show our detailed web page. We want to show a not found page. So here we're checking the data length. If the length is greater than 1, right, or greater than 0, I should say, it's going to go one path or the other. So this path splitting here, it's either going to go to the detailed web page or it's going to go to the not found web page. Awesome. Well, that's kind of cool, right? We've basically just created a website from NodeRed and FileMaker. We did so not by jumping into an IDE or a text editor. We actually did it visually with a flow. But let's take this one step further, right? Regular data is cool, right? JSON data is cool, FileMaker data is cool, but container data is better, right? Container data is images and files and things. So let's take a look at a flow that would support something like that. Here is a file upload example. This file upload example is similar to what we saw earlier, just a little bit more complex. We have, in this case, 3 endpoints rather than 2. We have a get complex endpoint. We have a post upload pretty endpoint, and then we have a get file endpoint. And what this does is allows us to upload a file to a FileMaker server, in this case an image, simply by dragging and dropping. So in order to do that, I have to go to this complex page. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, and I get to upload a file here. And I will go to images, and delete that one. I'm going to upload this file here to this hosted FileMaker file by dragging it into the browser. Cool. Shows up. There's my new record. There's my image. And all of that was done just by dragging it in. In fact, I could do multiple if I wanted to. I can grab this and say I want to upload it again. Drag it on top. There we go. I get a new record in FileMaker. There's record 203. There's another image. Right? And I can do that as much as I'd like. So not only can we go bidirectionally with FileMaker data, we can also do container data as well. Okay. So I'm going to save this one for DevCon. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a taste, but the rest of this is going to come at DevCon with some of the other flows. NodeRed and NodeRed Contrib FileMaker allows you to do a lot of really cool artificial intelligence or machine learning sets. So in this case here, I'm using a neural network to analyze a data set. In this case, I'm using what's called Brain.js. It's a JavaScript neural network analyzer, or neural network creator, I should say. In this case, it's using an endpoint. And we're not going to go too much into this. I just want to show it to you here. The endpoint is /analyze. So if I went to red.meetsymphony.com/analyze, it would get my data set from FileMaker. It would analyze the data set, form a find in FileMaker, and then if it can find the correct record, it's either going to create, if it can't find the correct record, it's going to create a new record. If it can find a correct record, it's going to edit the record, and then finally respond back to my requester. So in this case, this does not necessarily be initiated from FileMaker, right? You can initiate this from anywhere, calculate your data that you have within FileMaker, and then serve it back to the user. Cool. And I'm going through this real quick because I want to get to the next part of my presentation. I want to show you the scalability of this. So far, I've really only shown you one or two flows combined, but it turns out that this can become massively scalable very quickly. I want to show you this flow because it is very large. This entire flow supports the entire pipeline of a product that I'm about to show you. So we go from developing in an IDE all the way to end product, all within NodeRed, all right from here. If we move left to right, just to really quickly show this to you, I'm getting the particular platform. I'm checking the logic to make sure that it's correct logic, requiring a token if I need it. I'm then pulling in some of the file information, like the file name, and then uploading it to S3. From S3, I'm creating a record in FileMaker so that I know that I have a new product. And then from there, if somebody actually requests a file, I go through, grab the file, parse it, and then serve it back to them. So the entirety of this product flow is done within NodeRed. And if I wanted to make a change, if I need to make a change quickly, I could move something around and then just deploy. Cool. So I ran through that very quick. I want to pause a little bit for questions. If you want to dive deeper into this, everything is available open source online at these two links, github.com/ludog/FMS API Client. That's the base client that this is based on. And then github.com/ludog/NodeRed Contrib FileMaker, which is the nodes that you actually saw today. Every flow that I showed you is documented online. Every node that you saw in NodeRed also documented online. And that's NodeRed Contrib FileMaker. Any questions? It's free and open source. It costs nothing. Yeah. Very excited about it. As I said, it's been about a year and a half coming. I'm going to go deeper in my session at DevCon. So if you really want to see how to connect with IoT devices, how to use artificial intelligence in ways that actually make sense for a business process, check out that session.
So build something really big like this. How do you search on that screen?
Yeah, there's some search capabilities. I'll show you that. So you have filter nodes up top here. So if I know that, like, okay, I'm looking for like FileMaker list node, right? I can type in list here and it'll filter on the left-hand side. But then as you can see, I also have a lot of flows, right? I've been doing this quite a long time, so I've got a lot of these. So they do give you the ability to filter there as well. So if I wanted to find my authentication flow, right, I can find it then there. And you'll again see that one at DevCon as well. That's correct. There's also an API that supports NodeRed. So everything you saw, I did today by hand, but it doesn't necessarily need to be the case. In fact, if we peruse for a second on over to GitHub, I will show you what a flow looks like outside of NodeRed, and you'll see that it's really just JSON. So this is the main page for NodeRed Contrib FileMaker. This is the open source project. I've documented each individual node, provided illustrations for each node, and then within each illustration, I'm actually giving you the actual flow. So if you wanted to see what the logout illustration looked like and wanted to be able to actually try it out, you can click on the flow logout node and you actually get the code. And just to kind of show you that, I'll copy this, right? Copy this entire thing and show you what it looks like to actually have to import one. I'll head on over here, import from my clipboard. I'll say that I want it as a new flow. And now there's my logout example flow. So sharing nodes is very easy. It's very cool to be able to configure some. I've actually got some coming out in a month or two to allow you to do things like message to Twilio, push notifications like we saw earlier. You can configure those flows and then give them to other people. One thing to note about sharing flows with people, NodeRed Contrib FileMaker doesn't share your FileMaker user, server, or database. That's a security measure, right? We don't want you accidentally giving your credentials to someone else. So the client will stay, but anyone who you're sharing the flow to has to put in their username, password, server, and database name.
When you deploy, did that only deploy the active panel, or did that deploy everything in a group of panels?
Sure. I'll repeat the question for everyone online. So the question is, when you deployed, did I deploy just the panel or the group of panel? And the answer to that is based on a configuration. I mentioned this earlier on, but you have a deploy button in the top right corner. You can select whether you want to do a full deployment, meaning everything in the workspace, whether you want to just do the flow you've modified, or just a particular node you modified. So you have granularity there. That is one of the things that I looked at in the very beginning is like, okay, well, if I move one flow into production, I don't want to mess up all my other flows. And so this allows you to sandbox it a little bit.
So just to replace one or replace all?
Correct, yeah. So you can do that. I tend to work with just modified nodes, so I only deploy the things that I've changed for that reason, exactly.
It appears that everything that you've done is textual?
Yes.
Okay, so do you have some connection with SVN or Git?
Yes, yep.
So you can, within your product, you can actually push or pull into SVN or Git?
I don't want to say you could push or pull into SVN and Git, but the entire product is based on Git. It's all open source. You can use the GitHub API, which actually, just to show you a little bit of, that's this here.
So am I hearing deploy it, take the files, and push it to SVN yourself?
I'm kind of saying you can do either or, right? You can push it yourself, or you can have the client push for you. In particular, this merge git info node, check branch type node, and check major build nodes. That's actually part of a flow that would do it for me. So either or. But again, everything that I've shown today is all online documented. So sweet. So I know that Beverly really wants me to show off Dropship, and I really want to show it up as well, which is why I rushed through a little bit of NodeRed. I do want to make sure that I've answered any other questions. So anybody maybe online have a question? Let's see. Should find my.
I think John Brown, Jeremy Brown.
No? Okay, cool. So I'm really excited to show you what I have next. So I've been working on this product, and not just me, myself and Eden Morris, good friend of mine, we're working on this product for, I'd say 8 months to a year. It's something that I built because I got really tired with the things that were currently available. And I decided that rather than wait for something new, I was going to write it myself. It is called Dropship. I'll introduce it to you via the website. So Dropship is the future of FileMaker code management. Dropship is a native Mac OS or Windows clipboard manager designed specifically for FileMaker. It is designed to be kind of a quick fix or like a Cerebro-like application that allows you to access your clips from all your computers, share your clips with others, and create libraries to distribute your clips and version control your clips. It is free to use for up to 25 clips, at least now in the beta. In the future, that could change. Any clip that you decide or library you decide to share publicly is free as well. There's no charge to be able to, if you're sharing with the community. So let me. I am. Yep. At the moment, no, but we are working on that.
Ask a question?
Of course.
You have to keep repeating so my supervisor's been asking, well, how can we do versioning with FileMaker? You know, used to use things with Subversion and GitHub to manage the code from other programmers. But it's asking, well, how do we do that with FileMaker?
I wouldn't say that we can tackle that just yet. I'd want to give it a little bit more time. I'm going to stop sharing just so I can adjust my screen here for a second. We are looking at doing versioning, and I'll talk when we get to that point. I'll talk about it for a little bit, but I wouldn't say we're necessarily there yet.
There's a new script set just for you.
Yeah.
In 18.
Really?
Yeah.
Just
Save the file out as XML.
oh yeah.
And then you can throw it into SVN. It's only text at that point.
Yeah.
Throw it into SVN.
That's actually what I mentioned to him.
Pull that out. And then another script, and you can do diffs and everything else that you want at that point. And then you can.
What would I use to do the diffs?
Mac OS.
Kaleidoscope is a really good diff tool.
Yeah, BB edit, Kaleidoscope,
Yeah,
text edit, our text, the pink, I can't remember, text mate, I think is the, there's a bunch of editors. Some have different features that make it clearer as to what the differences are. So you really have to choose, look at all of them and choose the one that you like best.
You haven't looked at the feature yet. How readable is it?
It's all standard
XML.
XML.
I looked at it and said, oh, I think I know what that is.
You could figure it out. Once you get used to it, it's very readable. So there'll be borders like these are scripts, these are whatever, and those are script sets, and you'll be able to figure it out.
Okay, folks, sorry about that delay. I needed to clear some stuff out because I was doing development just before this. So in the top right corner of my screen, you can see that there's a little spaceship icon. That is Dropship. Doesn't have a name yet. I'm going to log in with my Dropship account as soon as I get my password. There it is. Yay, one password. Okay. Oh. May not be a very good demo, guys.
You just reinstalled it, right?
Yeah, that was probably not a good move.
In the meantime, saving its XML, is that only on the client? It's not a feature on server.
You can see, right? You were so quiet.
It's, you know, just like saving a call, yeah, it does sound, as it improves the call. And it could be great,
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Don't do development before you do a demo. Okay. So I've logged into Dropship. In the top right corner of your screen, you'll see that I have search key combo, recall last clip key combo, window positioning, and a FileMaker executable path. I'm going to select for the FileMaker executable path my FileMaker Pro Advanced. Click open, save that. And now I'm going to just create a FileMaker file, right? I'm a developer. I want to go in. I'm going to have to integrate a few APIs. I have to create a few fields. So this is from there. Call this Dropship. Hit save. And the first thing I want to do is I rely upon custom functions. It's one of the first things I need to add to my file. So I'm going to go to my custom function area. And then I don't remember all the custom functions I need. So I will hit my hotkey here and I get a little search bar. And that search bar is going to allow me to select some custom functions. I'll type in the first ones that I like to use. Shout out to Geist Interactive. Some things in Carbon, FM JSON validation, and FM JSON addition. I'll select FM JSON validation, paste it in, and now I have all my custom functions. I like more than just validation, so I'm going to go in and I'll do additions as well. I also like to use error trapping functions in my scripts. So I'm going to go in, I'll do the same thing. I'll find the error trapping ones, and I paste those in, and now I have those as well. So I've got all my custom functions directly in that area. But custom functions is not all that I need. I also need some tables too, right? And then here's kind of the interesting thing, right? When we're in this layout, we can't go anywhere else, right? Like FileMaker kind of sandboxes us into this layout until we're done. But using Dropship, we can kind of bend that rule a little bit in that I can use Dropship while in this layout. So I don't necessarily have the table at the moment, but I can jump into Dropship and find it. And in this case, I need my log table. So I'll type in log, and there's my generator log table. I'll paste it in. And then I also need, I don't even know if I have any more tables. I think that's the only table I have. No, that's the only one. I also need some script steps. So I'll hit OK, and I'll go into my script area. And now in this case, I need to create a script. And I'm a good developer, so I'm gonna take some time to actually comment my scripts. And what most of us here know is generally comments are done at the end, if at all, because they're just kind of a pain in the butt to write. So I'm gonna make that a little bit easier on myself. I'm gonna pull up my Dropship again. In this case, I'm gonna look for my script introduction. And that introduction isn't like we saw with custom functions. It's a little bit different. In this case, it's gonna ask me a bunch of questions. These questions are like the author, and because Dropship knows who I am, it puts in my name, created date, and you'll notice that the created date is current, right? It's the current date. My script purpose, and the script purpose in this case is to show how awesome Dropship is. The script results, it returns pure awesome, and it takes any parameters, so any, and any callers. Well, say it's good, I'll take a UI button. So UI button, and then I'll set this clip, paste it in, and I get the XML script introduction formatted with the pieces that I've input. So it made it really easy for me to actually configure my XML and then paste it into FileMaker. But that's not it, right? There's more to that. Later on, I may actually make updates to this script. And as a good developer, I want to make sure that I actually record those. So when I go into Dropship, and I'll set this up a little bit, I'm going to do my script update. And the script update is going to ask me, well, when did you make this update? Who are you, and what are the updates you made? Since the date is already filled in, I'll leave that. The author is already filled in, that's me. I'll leave that, and I'll just say, like, made the script more awesome, all caps, because that's how it's supposed to be. And I paste it in, and there you go. I have my script update. But I don't have any content yet. I actually want to interact with an API in this case. For this particular case, I'm going to build the script that we saw earlier in NodeRed. I'm going to build the script that allows us to push the script notifications. So I'm going to need a few things for that. One of the first things I need is the generator script. I like to use the generator HTTP request script. So I need to actually get that into my file here. So this is an entire script. I'm going to go in and let me search for generator. And I'll pause here for a second so we can check out this layout. The first one that came up is the generator script. That's the one that I want. And I can see that, okay, it's a script step, it's searchable, and it's in my API utilities library. We'll see what a library looks like in a little bit. I can see that it's the 2.0 generator script step. I'll select it. I'll paste it in. So well, that's a script step, sorry. I should want to do the script. Generator script. That's the one I want. And now I have my full script, the entire generator script. And generator script actually takes a request. It takes an API request. So I'm going to look for that as well. Not API error check. I want to do HTTP request. And in this case, this is a little bit more involved. I'm going to give it a URL, the URL that I want to hit, and then a body variable, the data that I'm going to pass to the URL. So in this case, it's going to be HTTPS. I'm going to take caps lock off because I'm not a monster. And it's going to be red.mutesymphony.com/notify. And the body variable is going to be, typing and talking is tough. The body variable is going to be data. So I'm going to set that clip and then paste it in. And you'll notice here that it's a little bit more advanced than what we saw earlier. This isn't just one script step. This is 1, 2, 3 script steps with a reference to a particular script. And I'll go in and set that to be the HTTP request. And now I've got the variable that I need in order to send the request, the script that's going to do the sending, and then the response. But I'm a good developer, so I'm gonna check to make sure that I don't have any errors when I make this call. So I'm gonna do the same thing. In this case, I'm gonna bring in my error checking, my API error check, and it's gonna ask me, okay, what's the response variable that I'm checking? What's the status code I'm looking for? And if there's any error data, what is that error data gonna be? Well, my response variable is response, because that's what I called it. My status code, I'm gonna look for a 200. And then my error data, if I have any, is gonna be the data that I sent the server. So I'll set this clip, and now I get an if statement that checks the JSON get element for the response variable for the code of 200. And then if that is actually correct, it's going to call one of the custom functions that I added in the very beginning. So it's going to call, in this case, the error custom function. So the idea here is that you're taking XML, you're modifying it based on what you need at the point, and then we're making it very easy to add back in. So far I've shown you custom functions, I've shown you tables, scripts, and script steps. But it turns out that anything that can be copied to the clipboard can be used by Dropship. And that also means layout objects. So let's take a quick second for that. I'll save this. What's that? Yeah, we're getting more advanced here. So I have my layout here. I want to add a button, right? Generic button. Come in here. I'll look for my button. I'll add my generic button there, paste it in. There we go. Now I have my Sinky Doodle right there. I'll grab another one. Button. There's a success button. And this success button takes two things, right? It's going to take a tooltip and a label, right? The tooltip is going to be like, this tooltip tells a user what to do, and the label is push me, right? I set that clip, paste it in, I get the button with the label of push me, and then if I exit the layout, hover over it, maybe I got the tooltip. Did I? It's
No,
there.
On the hover.
On the
It's
hover.
there. Yeah, you enter.
Yeah, the tooltip is there. We can see it in the top right corner, right? Let's like this. There's a tooltip.
Is it coded? Is it coded or is it?
Yeah, it's quoted. Yeah, it should be there. I'm not necessarily sure. I'm not very good with tooltips. But the idea there is that I've automatically added the label, automatically added the tooltip. In this case, I didn't choose to add a script or any other thing, but anything that you can modify in the XML, we can supplant for you. Doesn't mean you can do everything, but we can do a lot of things. Let's take a second and look at how I got those script steps and that XML into the file, because it's, I think, one of the most powerful parts of this platform. And I did so with what's called the Dropship Manager. This is the work, very, very good work of Eden Morris, brilliant developer. These are my clips in the Dropship Manager. You should know that everything that I've shown you today is housed on our server. So you add something to the Dropship Manager, it's housed on our server, it's safe, secure. We're working on actually having it be encrypted, so you're the only person that can access it. But it's also saved in this Dropship Manager. So it's not like we're just taking your clips for you. They're also stored here. This is your own FileMaker file. You can change it. You can do whatever you like. It's fully open. On the left-hand side, I have all the script steps that I have. And you notice I have some like FM JSON additions, FM JSON validation, which we saw in the very beginning. Those come from Geist Interactive's Carbon FM. And in those cases, it's good to distribute those not just as single clips, but actually as a library. So something like FM JSON validation, FM JSON additions, they're actually part of the Carbon library. And so if I go to my libraries and descriptions, I can see those there. What we're allowing you to do here is to save your FileMaker clips, put them in a library, and then share them with other people. If Todd makes an update to Carbon, he could do so if he wanted to this library, and I would instantly get that update. What's even better than that is we version control, not FileMaker version control, but version control the clip when it's inside of a library. So what that means is if I'm using a library with a particular script step and Todd makes a change, we know about that change and we can notify you to say, hey, Todd made a change. Do you want to keep the version you have or do you want the version that Todd just made, right? We have that ability once it's added to a library.
So all your functionality can overwrite the contents of the script or contents of the...
And not overwrite automatically. At this point, we're just looking at it and saying like there is a difference based on versions. We don't necessarily know what that difference is. We don't have that capabilities yet. We know that there is a difference, and you as a user can say like, okay, I want to keep this based on what it is, or I want to stick with what I have. You can what we call forfeit. We're not doing diffing yet. We're not doing any security reviews, anything like that, because we're not there yet. This is still in beta, but that is the direction we're moving. Going back to my clip area here, I want to show you just like what this looks like and how you would interact with it, so you can see how I do some of the supplanting of script steps. So I'll come on over here, I go to my file, and I really like, for whatever reason, this container, right? This is a container that I like, so I'll copy it, right? That's actually not a good example. Let me grab a button. Button is a little bit better. I got a button there. And I want to save it as XML that I'm going to modify later. I'll copy it, right? So now it's in my clipboard. I'll add a new clip. And we already know that you have XML on your clipboard, so we let you know what it is. In this case, I've copied a layout object, and I can title this like My Awesome Button. But I showed you that you could do these substitutions. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to head over to my code area, and you'll see that I have some XML, right? This is the raw portion of the clip. And there might be some things within this button that I might want to change, right? I don't necessarily know what they are because I just kind of picked something, but font size. Let's say I don't want the font size to be 12, right? I want the font size to be set by the user as they so choose. So I'm going to add a mustache template, in this case, curly brace, the tag that I want, curly brace, tells Dropship, hey, this is a template, right? Let's maybe do one more just so we have it. There's a lot of CSS. You can, if you want, update the CSS. I'm not going to jump into that today. What else might we want to update? All right, we'll leave it at that. We're just doing one. We're doing the size. So I've added my template. I need to tell Dropship exactly what it is. So I go to my substitution area and tell it to detect the tags. It's going to look through that XML and tell me, okay, you've added one tag of size. Right? That size has a label. If I want to, I can add a default value. Something really cool with the default values, we actually allow you to use Dropship's rendering engine to supplant any sort of value you want. So if I want, I can come over here and choose a template. When we did the script introduction and it was automatically setting the date, that was done with this template. I'm not going to choose any here because it really wouldn't make sense. But if I wanted to say like, this is always going to be uppercase, or I want a particular type of date, I could select one of those template dates and it would automatically update when I go to paste the clip. I'm going to leave that no default value. I'm going to sync this now to the server. It's gone up to our API. And if I want to, I can come in here and find my awesome button. There it is. Select it. Now I gave it the tag, so I'm going to the size of, I'll do 16 here. Set the clip. Head back on over here, paste it, and now I have the button. And if I add, that's the icon. Add some text. Text. Oh, that's not what I want. Actually, looks like that didn't run. Not a good example. But anyway, you can paste layout objects. I'm going to take this a little bit further. I like buttons, but I like buttons with icons, right? And FileMaker actually has a very specific format in order to conditionally format your button. A lot of icons that you find online are don't necessarily have that format. And you might have seen a website called FMS. I'll head there now. Just kind of show you in case you've seen it before. Todd is very cool in that he's hosted this for a long time, but it's actually based on, oh, I hear echo. It's actually based on a open source project that I wrote probably 3.5 years ago at this point called Gulp FM Icon Converter. And now that Dropship lives on your client, I thought that, hey, that'd be a great place to actually have something like this icon converter. So it's hidden at the moment because it's still getting the kinks worked out. But if you tap on the little little heart in the bottom right corner, you get a little drop zone area, right? And what I can do here is I can bring up the noun project. And let's say that I want this bicycle as a FileMaker icon. Well, this icon is not necessarily compatible. So what I'll do is I'll drag it on top of this Dropship area. It's going to format it in the correct format for me and then spit it out to my desktop. Now, coming very soon, we're actually going to take that icon and put it into a button for you. Because if you put it into a button and then paste the button, it'll automatically import the icon as well. But that's a little bit further down the road. If I want to, I can come on in over here, not that guy, this guy, and add a button. And choose an icon, add the addition symbol. There's my bicycle, insert it, and now I have that icon. So I'm already over time. I will maybe give people some time for questions. Before I do that though, so Dropship has been in beta for at least 4 or 5 months now. It's been through 3 rounds of beta, 2.5 rounds of beta. We're starting 1 more. It'll start on the weekend. Everyone is invited. All you have to do is go to the website, which I'll give out once the beta starts, and then check it out. We'd love your feedback. We really want to make sure that this tool does everything that developers want it to do, and that it does it in a way that really allows people to share the clips that they've made in a way that benefits the entire community. I mentioned in the very beginning, but one of the biggest things about this product is that if you're willing to share your FileMaker code with other people, that code will be free, meaning it will not cost you anything to host that code on Dropship if you're willing to share with everyone. We want this to become a very much a community effort. And in order to do that, we'd like to give you a free account if you're willing to share and make your clips public, preferably in a library. I'm not over time. I'm not over time. Cool. Does anybody have any questions? Should probably look at the chat. No, this is a Lou and Eden Morris project. Yeah, we worked on this for a little while now. This project also, it came out of Clip Manager. Has everyone ever used Clip Manager before? It's a really good product. Allows you to kind of save your clips in a library. You know what? I don't know. I don't know the actual people that created it. But in my mind, the reason why I built this is it had two limitations. I couldn't share amongst a team and keep the same coding styles amongst a team, and then I couldn't have the same snippets across my different computers. And I've got like 5 different machines. I go to a particular machine, my laptop one day in my van, my desktop another day at home. I want the same clips. So I decided to make something that would work both cross-platform and then across different devices. So cool. See if there's anybody online. Nope. Cool. All right, guys. Thank you very much. No, not until it goes into beta. It'll go into beta this weekend. We still, like you saw, still got some things we're working out till the next beta. Once it goes into beta, I will distribute a link. I'm guessing you're the person I should send it to distribute it to everyone else? For sure. Yep.
Oh, we're actually, we actually have a community post on this meeting. You can just share it directly there.
Perfect. Yeah, we need a day or two to get some of the infrastructure up for the next version of this, and then we'll put it up for a beta. It'll probably be a long beta. It'll probably go a little bit past DevCon. That's mainly because we want feedback. We want people to use it. And we want people to create libraries for it. It's one of the things that I think is going to make a real big difference as we move forward as a community, is to be able to share things like the Carbon library, like Weebrick's Elemental UI, to be able to kind of standardize things or just at least share code with people, so that we have best practices and we have the most efficient code possible and an open community. So yeah, that's what I got. Thanks.